Thank you. Well, first, happy Mother's Day to everybody and welcome. It is the late afternoon in Galveston, Texas. I don't think you can see the ocean behind me, but most people, or many people, at least particularly outside the United States, are unaware that Texas, in fact, has oceanfront property. So it's back there. It's kind of a gray day here, so you can't really see it, but we have some dolphins in the background, orca whales eventually, sort of move around. I'm happy to be here. I spent most of my life really fascinated by science since I was a kid. I have a 4-year-old, believe it or not. One of the little gadgets I introduced her to, I'm holding up right now, is a miniature Tesla coil, which you connect to a 9-volt battery, which I found out unbeknownst that can actually stop your heart. So I disconnected it from the 9-volt battery. That's how powerful a Tesla coil is, and I'll talk about that in a second, because it is the epicenter of a lot of the discussion we're going to have today, or impliedly, about time travel and EVP and Tesla. Again, there's an outline that I put together, just kind of a quick introduction to the topics that I want to talk about today. Several are very interesting, I think, and really haven't come up in the literature. I don't have a mathematics background or a physics background. My background is just in arts and sciences, theater, and law, interestingly. If you're interested in historical aspects that are interesting about the life of Nikola Tesla, I actually wrote a radio play about 10 years ago for National Public Radio, and I think you can actually access it on this site. It's written in the old style of old-time radio with the organ and everything, and about 80% of it's accurate and about 20% of it's speculation, which is starting to come true, which is interesting. The subject of the future is very interesting to me. I do have a website, which is www.future2050.net. It's free. I invite everyone to subscribe, and we'll have a contributor button going on this month, but I've talked about different issues. I've mostly written the content right now, but if any of you are interested in writing content, we can certainly put it up. There have been various subjects. Last month was all about time travel and about Tesla and aspects of that, which I think was the kind of catalyst of getting this thing going. So let's get into it. Nikola Tesla is probably one of the most brilliant men who ever lived, and we know that Sonia Rinaldi is still talking to him. So his spirit is alive, which is amazing. Parenthetically, I've been interested in EVP almost 30 years. I had the old-time little tape recorders back then. My brother Todd Monster, I don't know if he's participating, hope he is a filmmaker in Los Angeles and has been dedicated to the EVP community for many, many years. I've been around it peripherally, but I absolutely believe in it and was fascinated by Sonia's receipt of information and broadcasts from Tesla and from some other parties. And it got me thinking about it. Very briefly, I'm not going to get into the historical background in any detail about Tesla, because probably all of you know about him anyway or can find out about him. He was born in 1856. He died in 1943. He's known for inventing hundreds of inventions and patents. I'm a patent attorney as well. That's one of my areas of practice, intellectual property, particularly computer science. And Tesla was able to foresee the internet, foresee the iPhone, all of our technology that we have now and take for granted that we didn't have 10 years ago. Tesla thought about it in 1899 and actually devoted an entire column of these amazing, colorful magazines. A Century magazine was one of them at the time in Collier's. Around the turn of 2 centuries ago, and Tesla talked about the future, and people thought he was crazy. And of course, we know that he was brilliant. He started off in Serbia. He was an apprentice and helped basically an engineer who worked for Thomas Edison, who's not a very nice person, was not a very nice person, contrary to the movie portrayal of Thomas Edison. Edison's money was behind direct current, which could only go a couple of yards and then had to have a transformer to start all over again. And then Nikola Tesla invented alternating current, which is what we use today, which is very powerful and very dangerous. Edison was concerned and worried about the competition. So he came up with the idea of an electric chair. I don't know if a lot of you know about that, but it's kind of interesting. And the electric chair was actually a marketing device and a real device, because it killed thousands of people, that was come up by Edison to destroy the idea of alternating current. Because he used it essentially to supply the energy to provide the toxic electric charge that killed people. So he wanted people to be afraid of alternating current, and that was the bad current between Edison and Tesla for all of the years. Tesla and not Marconi invented radio. And to this date, most high schoolers and a lot of college kids don't know that. And the reason for that is there was incredible jealousy. Tesla's one of his main inventions was, again, the Tesla coil. This is maybe 2 inches wide. The one we're going to talk about was 50 feet wide in Walden Cliff, New York, that could actually generate lightning bolts 50 feet long. It almost near killed Tesla and actually sent him on one of his first time travel voyages, which is what we'll talk about. But the sad thing for Tesla, and it tells you a lot too about intellectual property, my area of practice, is that it's politically engendered in a lot of ways, and it's who you know. Tesla was able to file and in fact get a patent for the first device that created radio. Marconi, it created something called Marconi Wireless, believe it or not, in the early 1900s, and with the support of many rich people back then, in addition to Edison, went before the United States Patent and Trademark Office and got them to cancel Tesla's invention, and they declared Marconi the creator of radio, and that was not actually set aside into a United States Supreme Court case. About 6 months after Tesla died, he was named to be, in fact, the creator of radio. Now, radio was not what he was after. What Tesla was after was the creation of electromagnetic fields. And that is, in fact, what the Tesla coil does. And it's very interesting. So how does a 9-volt battery connected to, can you all see this right now? I think you probably can. Can you see this little device that I have in my hand? Okay. It's a series of essentially wires going around and around. We have an electrical engineer that can, I'm sure, provide more information. I am not that. But what it does is it creates enormous fields of power called electromagnetic field. It's a way that we can actually create radio and electric power. And to the extent that we have more wires spinning around, also in terms of modern day technology, if we deal with basically increasing conductivity by reducing temperature down to absolute zero, we can create enormous electronic fields. But this device is so dangerous that I stopped using it. It can actually light up a full fluorescent light that I've held in my hand about yay far away from this device. And the idea was that Tesla wanted to create free electricity throughout the entire world that was free, that didn't need the use of the horrible wires, which we still use today. The utility companies didn't like it, and they worked hard to destroy Tesla. They did destroy Tesla, ultimately, physically, psychically, and psychologically, which is very sad. Not the topic of the conversation today. But let's start with one of Sonia's experiments from a book that she wrote called The Milligan Experiment. I met Sonia years ago in Atlanta, going to one of her conventions or symposiums with my brother Todd Monster, an amazing woman. I'd love to go down to Sao Paulo and meet her with all the amazing work that she's doing, because it's paradigm shifting. Everything that we think is important will be superseded by the work that I honestly believe that Sonia is doing, if we can provide the scientific foundation for it. You know, everything that we need, from a Faraday cage to getting peer-reviewed researchers out there with money to evaluate it. I think that's what my brother Todd Monster was trying to do. And I think he ran into some funding issues in an effort to do that. But what I've done is, so what I did was I just distilled 2 sentences from the Milligan Experiment. And there's more recent work that you all can cite that will probably be more relevant than this. But this is the from May of 19 from the Milligan Experiment. Sonia is talking through one of her devices, and she's speaking to Tesla. And she's saying, can wormholes be used to send data files to us? And Tesla says, oh, yes. Now, isn't that interesting? And I wonder why, you know, Sonia, I didn't have a chance to talk to her about it, but she's onto the wormholes, which we'll talk about. And then she's conversing with a Mr. German. I don't quite recall his name. I mean, what his role is. But, you know, he's out there. And Sonia says, are you speaking from the North Station? And Mr. German says, record, alphas are beautiful. I went there to see. And I know there are different names for the broadcast station that, you know, superior minds after death are attempting to communicate with us from the North Station. There are other names for it. But that's where I believe that Sonia and all of you that are engaged in EVP experiments, and so am I, are getting a lot of our broadcasts from. They're trying to communicate with us with technology. which is very interesting. And so the question is, for those that just tuned in, you can hit a link button on my outline to get an outline about the things that I'm covering right now. And I'm just going to go over things pretty rapidly because there's so much to talk about. And the question and answers are interesting. And then I'm going to suggest some pathways that maybe some of you all who are doing more fundamental research in this area might pursue. I was fascinated by the speaker earlier who talked about doing some recording at Colorado Springs. That's where Tesla had one of his major experiments, which is interesting. And actually one of my play broadcast at public radio at that city, because it makes sense since that's where Tesla had a lot of his inventions. But the question is, you know, what are they building at the North Station? I mean, is it for real? Well, it seems, and I've heard the broadcast. It sure looks like the pictures of Tesla, and the content seems very real. And I believe it to be real. I don't think people have fundamentally looked at what technology is involved in it. So are we at a point in our technological evolution? Again, my business is intellectual property. I represent inventors, some people who are very future oriented. That's why I write www.future2050.net. They're thinking about what the future is going to be. And will it involve time travel? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. And I think that is what perhaps Tesla and everyone else is wanting us to do, is to build the commensurate technology so we can communicate better with them and actually go visit them possibly. And that's kind of what I'm going to get into. I think that's what they're up to. So I call this, I'm Charles Moster. I'm not very well known, and that's okay. I've written a number of books. I just do this because I enjoy it. You know, I'm not looking for public attention in any way. I like to engender conversation, you know, support research. But my theory is that Tesla is using a wormhole to transfer communication, which replicates the electromagnetic field of a Tesla coil. And I think that he stumbled upon time travel back in 1899. I'll get to that in a second. That wasn't his intent in building the Tesla coil at all. I think he was trying to come up with devices to generate wireless electricity, which is what he was trying to get Edison to buy into, and the Vanderbilts and all the people that held utilities, the robber barons, they called them in the early 1900s, didn't want to give anything away for free. They still don't. That's why we have people dying in the pandemic, you know, unable to take care of themselves, and, you know, people dying of the recent Arctic blast that blasted its way from Canada to the United States. People actually died in Galveston, Texas, my town where I live right now, which is typically in the 60s, because they didn't have heat and they couldn't afford electric power. You know, that's an absurdity. And that's what Tesla was trying to counteract. And that's one of the reasons why I think he had a lot of people pushing back against him, because he was a visionary, and we're still not ready for people like that. But I believe that the electromagnetic field, and I'll get into that in a second, that's created by the Tesla coil is fundamental to time travel through something called time dilation. And did all of you see, I'm sure you all saw Interstellar? Can I hear a yay, yay? No, I guess we're all muted out, but people, I'm sure, saw Interstellar and loved it. And do you remember when they visited that planet that had enormous gravity? And they were worried about spending too much time there, because every 15 minutes, I think, equated on the planet to maybe 5 years going back on Earth or on the spacecraft that was orbiting the high density planet. So I'm going to talk about time dilation in a second, and I think that is what the Tesla coil is all about. You'll see nothing in the literature, or very little in the literature, that correlates time dilation with Tesla. You know, I don't know if I actually ran the Google search, so I probably should have. But I ran the search on trying to find actual physics. You know, I have some mathematical background, not much, but correlations between the concept of time dilation and electromagnetic fields and gravitational fields are distinct, and there's nothing or very little. And I'll talk about it in a second, but an electromagnetic field is what's generated by a simple magnet. So again, I have a 4-year-old who's going to be turning 5 soon. I'm 66. That's why my topic last month was on immortality, because I've got to live a long time. to watch her walk down the aisle and do all the great things, and hopefully I'll have time to do that. But I got her a magnet set, you know, we have a little replica of the Tesla coil and all kinds of stuff that she can play with. But it generates, every kid knows that, an adult, if you have metal specs around, it generates a field. And the more powerful the magnetism, the more powerful the field. The other kind of field is really what Einstein spoke about in his pivotal equation, E equals mc squared, and that is a gravitational field. And that's what a wormhole is all about. And that's when mass, particularly mass in great quantities, creates a magnetic field, which is a lot like an electromagnetic field, but it's different. But it also bends time and space around it. And we're going to talk about that as well in a moment. Again, I don't have an extensive background in mathematics, and maybe that's a way that I could perhaps explain it better to others that are similarly inclined. And I have a feeling that those that know it better than I can really add the bits and pieces, and that's perfectly fine. I don't claim to be an expert, but I know I'm fascinated by it and always have been. I think it's my role maybe to kind of put some things out there that maybe people haven't thought about before. Now, there's another way to create a transportation device to the future and the past. And this is what Sonia confirmed that Tesla's doing, and it's a wormhole. And there's only one device in the entire world that can create potentially a mini wormhole, and that's the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland. If you remember when they were trying to set it up for the first time, there were the naysayers that were afraid. It's very sad that we still have people like this, the same people that think that COVID is fake, which is outrageous, but they were afraid that we were going to set off a chain reaction that would destroy the universe if we turned on the Large Hadron Collider. And they actually got a law firm, I make sure my law firm wouldn't do it, get an injunction to prevent them from starting up, you might remember, for a while, until that was debated. You know, I don't see what judges are going to understand about that whole thing. Of course, we're still here, as far as I know, and it hasn't happened. But the point is that there may be many wormholes or black holes that are microscopic or at the quantum level. There's some interesting research on that being engendered at CERN that could be used as a way potentially to send photons through as a means of communication, which would be absolutely fascinating. Communicating information through a quantum field essentially created within a microscopic wormhole that lives inside the Large Hadron Collider. Some very interesting neural research for many years trying to hypothesize, and I've written about that as well, how memory works. I mean, we're very primitive as a species. I'll speak to myself in that regard. We don't understand memory. We have no clue of memory, how it works, what it does, where it's stored. I'm an advocate of a French philosopher who I studied at Georgetown by the name of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a French philosopher who's long gone, but he was a paleontologist and also a theologian and almost excommunicated by the Catholic Church. Fascinating man who was very interested in memory and came up with some very interesting ideas about memory. But there's some research now that in fact phosphorus atoms may be a gateway through their own kind of field to fields of information that store information at a quantum level. But I'm turning the page now on my outline. If you're there, it's on the link. The question is, what does the Tesla coil do? And again, I love this little device. I really don't even know what the parts do. I never had the kind of mind that could put this together. I never became an electrical engineer for that reason. But I was very good at theorizing, and that's what I think maybe is my role, and putting things together. And maybe it's my background in theater, or just the way my brain functions or malfunctions, that allows me sometimes to see things that maybe other people don't see. But this little device can create an enormous magnetic field. So let's say you took this device and you expanded it in width by 50 feet. Okay, 50 feet. It would be enormous. Okay, what power would it have? Well, Tesla put that together at Walden Cliff in 1902, and actually earlier at an earlier experiment in 1899 that we're going to talk about. But I know that in Walden Cliff, the story is Max Moster. My brother may not know this. Hopefully he joined us. I'm not sure. My grandfather emigrated from the old world, and I think he recalled, or I got the story that they were able to see these enormous lightning bolts from the backyard. And I don't know if that's a fable of the Moster family or not, but the 50-foot Tesla coil that was on top of that tower that you see was something that we think is quite common right now. You look out your window, you're going to see a tower. No one even thought of that in 1902, let alone 1899, and it generated 4 quality lightning bolts that lit up the New York sky, and actually near killed Tesla several times. So the issue is, what kind of electromagnetic fields were generated by a 50-foot Tesla coil? Well, they were enormous. Interestingly now, in terms of magnetism, we measure magnetism in terms of Teslas. So, you know, I don't know what, there weren't Tesla readings back in 1902, but they were enormous and they were quite dangerous, but they were extremely powerful. So let's talk about the Tesla coil and the electromagnetic field, and why that's important, I believe, to time travel. And this is why I think, at least according to the literature and journalistic reviews at that time in some major magazines, that Tesla stumbled upon it, although he wasn't looking for it. He wasn't really looking for radio either. Radio was a byproduct of the Tesla coil that led to radio communication. He was looking to how to generate and capture electromagnetic radiation, which is what we call electricity. But if you turn to the next page, I love this, and there's actually a video that accompanies it, and I actually played it for my 4-year-old, Charlie Monster, who got it right away. So if Charlie can get it at 4, everyone's going to get it. And we're dealing with quite a sophisticated audience here, so I'm not worried about y'all. But until I saw this years ago, I frankly didn't understand what gravity was. And gravity, and again, I'm not talking about complex issues relating to gravity, but gravity is fundamentally a geometric process. It's geometry. So in other words, you think about throwing a ball in the air and the air drops and the ball drops. Or the old story of Newton, you know, being hit on the head by an apple, whether that's true or not, you know, whatever that is. And so we think of gravity as a force. You know, the earth is pulling on the apple that's falling into the earth. And in fact, that's absolutely incorrect. What you're looking at these 2 pictures is, in fact, time and space or space-time is a fabric. So you're looking out endlessly at space. You know, you're looking across your room. You can't see space the way a fish can't see water within a fishbowl. At night, you can look at stars that are potentially billions of light years away, but you can't see the distance in between. You can't see the distance in between your own hands. You can't see the effect of your feet on the gravitational field of the earth. All of this is invisible. But essentially what's happening is, and you can look at the first picture, is that the earth is mass. It has weight, it has composition, it has consistency and mass. And what it actually does is it rolls over a fabric and creates a dimple or a hole. And that hole is what we call gravity. And a lot of people don't understand that. And that's what Einstein was discussing. Again, I am not a physicist, and you know, if we have people that have these advanced degrees during the question and answer period, please be kind to me. I'm looking at it as best as I can understand, but I believe this is correct. And the way you illustrate it, and my kid got it this way, is you get a big barrel and you put a thin film of spandex, just like in your bathing suit, on top of it, and you put a large sphere with mass in the middle, and it creates a hole. And that is essentially what Earth is doing to the time-space or space-time fabric all around the Earth. It's creating a dimple. And then if you, and that's what happens in this video, it looks, I think this guy's a very famous high school teacher. He throws marbles out on the spandex. And what happens is they start revolving around the big hole that's underneath the Earth, because it sinks into that particular hole. And you can see this in a lot of science museums for kids all the time. You see this kind of thing happening. And so essentially what's happening, as you see in the second picture, is that mass bends space-time. That's what's happening. So the big convention, or the big understanding around the time of 1899, 1900, 1901, H.G. Wells' amazing book, The Time Machine, still the best ever written, came out in 1899, which I think is one of the best time travel books ever. Obviously the seminal one at first that was written, talks about this. And the idea was that we think about dimensions as being separate. Space has 3 dimensions, and we think of time as something else. But in fact, you combine space and time as a fabric, almost like spandex, and you can stretch it, and you could bend it. You could bend it like a pretzel. There was an amazing, brilliant physicist who went to Princeton, escaped the Nazis, and parenthetically, Einstein, who was brilliant, was hated by the Nazis because he was Jewish. I'm Jewish. He was hated by the Jews, and they called his physics, Jew physics, fake physics, and we know what happened to the Nazis after World War II and else. He was right on. Kurt Gödel was another famous man who came up with something called Gödel circles, but he theorized that you could bend space-time, and I don't get into this here, but somewhat, into a pretzel, a circle, and if you were to do that, you could join the present with the past and actually travel to any point in the past. And that's an area that's very interesting. There's a physicist that I'll speak briefly in a moment out of the University of Connecticut, brilliant, one of the very few in the United States, sadly, African-American physicists at the University of Connecticut, who's been working on this for the last 25 years. He wrote a book on it. I'll put it on the internet later on so you all could read it. It's an amazing book. And his goal was to visit his dad, who died. He was a television repairman because he couldn't go to college. And he worked his butt off so his kid could go to college. And he's brilliant and became a physicist at the University of Connecticut. And he's using lasers to try to create holes in space-time and twist it. And that's really what's going on. So let's talk about that. Okay, so what's essential to time travel, and this is why Sonia asked the question. I don't know if she's with us tonight. I know she's very busy, but she asked the question. So you guys ask her later on. And I think I asked her in an email. I didn't get an email back. I email her once in a while. I know she's very busy, but I asked her, like, how did you come up with that question out of your book about Mr. Tesla or Dr. Tesla? Why are you using wormholes to communicate in space, time? I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, I'm wondering why she asked that. She probably knows all the stuff that I'm talking about, but I don't know if she knows the specifics. It goes to a concept called time dilation, and this is really important. Time travel is proven when it comes to traveling to the future, but not the past. Okay, and I want to talk about that. If we didn't have time dilation, you wouldn't have GPS, which all of us are using right now. How does a satellite know precisely where you are at any point in time? It has to deal with a quagmire called time dilation, which was prophesized and predicted by Albert Einstein. And what it basically says is that the faster you go, and this is one of the issues in Interstellar, one of my favorite sci-fis, or the closer you get, I'll put it this way, to a gravitational force, the slower your clock will go in relation to everyone outside that gravitational force. So again, for those that joined us now in Interstellar, while they're trying to find a world that's like the Earth, they stumble upon a planet that has enormous gravity. They decide to go explore it. The gravity is so strong that 15 minutes on this planet equals 15 years outside the planet. So their buddy who's in the spaceship circling the planet is aging at an enormous rate, while the astronauts from Interstellar are on this planet with massive mass and gravity, and their clock is going very, very slow and very, very fast outside. So when they finally leave the planet, their colleague is 40, 50 years older. And that's what is called time dilation. The typical way you hear the story is through the twins paradox. And I've written several children's stories trying to explain the concept to kids using frogs instead of twins, because it's complicated, but I think kids can get it. But basically, this is where Einstein came in. Einstein didn't deal with the gravitational effect to create time dilation. And I found nothing in the literature on this, which is interesting. So you guys that know more than I do, write down time dilation, electromagnetic field, and see what you can figure out. Because I think therein lies the connection to Tesla coil, because the Tesla coil at great power is creating electromagnetic field, which is equivalent to gravitational field. I mean, I know it's not equivalent if you're a physicist, but the process in terms of bending space-time is very similar. and creating time dilation effects. But anyway, what Einstein dealt with is the twin paradox, and that was where you have two twins, and then one twin decides to stay on Earth. They're both like 25 years old. The other twin goes off in this amazing spacecraft that can approach the speed of light. Now, you could never hit the speed of light, according to Einstein, but you can get close to it. And the faster, Einstein wrote about this, and that's in his theories, his field equations, which I do not understand, I don't claim to. But the faster you go, the slower your clock goes on your spaceship in relation to or relative to the people on Earth. Theirs goes much, much faster relative to your clock, which goes slower. So if you approach the speed of light or go very, very fast, and you're on a spacecraft for a year, you may come back 15 years later when you get back to the Kennedy Space Center. And if he visits his brother at that point, his brother might be 35 or 45 years old, and only 1 year has gone by for the guy who's gone very fast. Now, this all may sound like conjecture, but it's not. And so if you look at the photographs that I have, which is really interesting, of the building, and I thought I had one, but maybe it didn't get on this one with respect to the GPS. I did with the GPS satellite. But if you go to the Empire State Building and you have a very precise atomic clock, the clock at the bottom of the building will move slower than the clock at the top of the building. And that's absolutely proven. It's scientifically proven. Well, how can clocks move at different speeds? Well, it's because the clock at the bottom is closer to sitting on planet Earth. And there's higher magnetic field. Consequently, according to Einstein's equations, which primarily focus on velocity, but also gravity, under time dilation theories, it's going to move slower because that's what happened to the folks in Interstellar compared to the clock that's higher up. And they can actually prove it. Time dilation is correct. Now, if you look at the picture above, and this is fascinating. If you don't know this, I didn't know this until like a year ago, and maybe you guys just know it, but it's fascinating to me because this is GPS. So how does a satellite know, for example, I'm driving around my neighborhood and it knows that I've gone down an extra block and now I'm on a different street, Meridian Avenue, versus Medina Avenue? How does it know that I've gone this distance? The only way it can know that is by an algorithm that accounts for time dilation. And the reason for it is that time where I am sitting with my iPhone moves slower, even if it's almost an incalculable small amount slower than time in the satellite that is figuring out the distances through GPS. And if there's and the reason is that the satellite is further away from the gravitational field of the Earth and the mast, and time is moving just a teeny bit faster. And it's something that we can't even measure in trillions of seconds, and even the smaller amounts than that. But if there was no way to reconcile that with the receiving station, which is your iPhone on Earth, you would be off by miles and miles and thousands of miles, and we wouldn't be able to do anything. So the algorithm is in fact what's taking care of that. So what I'm interested in, which I have seen very little literature, is the gravitational part of the E equals mc squared equation as it relates to time travel. You see everything talking about, or a lot talking about, essentially traveling at the speed of light. I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon, and problematic to that is the nuclear test ban treaty, which I understand we don't want to be exploding nuclear weapons on Earth. But there's a lot of research, and I don't want to shock anyone here, but there's a lot of research that shows you can detonate a nuclear weapon in space if you're far enough away from the Earth without creating any environmental effects and actually move at an incredible velocity. There was a program called Project Orion that preceded all of our chemical rockets in the 1960s that was banned after the nuclear test ban treaty. And not all countries, including India, are signatories, interestingly, to the nuclear test ban treaty. They could potentially do that, but we're not going to see really any increase. And I'm not advocating that. I don't want people to form a judgment that like I'm into exploding nuclear weapons. I'm not. But I'm just saying that there's a technology there where if you're millions of miles away from Earth, you could explode a fission or fusion device, and you can move at a good percentage of the speed of light, which no one's really thinking about. And I'm very much into, and I've written about aerospace and technology along those lines. But here, my interest is in using the Tesla coil as a mechanism for time travel by creating a much larger gravitational force. Because the same way you can increase the speed and create time dilation, you can achieve time dilation by increasing gravitational force or increasing electromagnetic force. Now, the physicists that talk about time travel, I think, get it wrong. And it's easy for me to say, well, I'm 66, so I can say whatever the hell I want. But I'm telling you, I'm not in the business of physics. But, like Tipler is a very brilliant guy. I can't get him to communicate with me in any way, maybe because I'm a lawyer. He's one of the top physicists in the world. But, he's looking at, creating a device that replicates all the mass in the universe, or getting close enough to a black hole. That is never going to happen to create distortions in time and space. But what will happen is getting a force equivalent to gravitational force artificially created that can create time travel. And under Einstein's theory of time dilation, we can travel to the future. That's what the twin paradox is all about. So think about it. If I travel at the speed of light or close to it, and Todd stays at Earth, and Todd and I and Todd's 4 years younger. My brother Todd Monster was a fabulous filmmaker and has studied EVP and knows the EVP community. If I went at a tremendous rate of speed and I came back, I would be a couple of years older, but I would come back to the future maybe 30 or 40 years later, and hopefully my brother would be there if they discover immortality 50, 60 years from now. But when you time dilate, when you accelerate at enormous rates of speed, you go into the future because everyone else is aging at a very fast rate of speed and you're not. A year goes by for you. You come back 30 years later. Suddenly, it's not 2020 anymore. It's 2050, and that's the year I arrive with. I could spend a year at a high velocity near the speed of light and come back to 2050 in 2 years or 1 year. And everyone will be different. The streets will be different. People will be dead. Hopefully our country will be here. Who knows these days, or other countries. I know we've got an international community. But the same thing happens. That's a proven technology, time dilation. And we think of it only as it relates to velocity. But let's think about it as it relates to field energy. So, we're not going to be able to create enormous mass through gravitation. That's not going to happen because we're not going to get close to a black hole anytime soon, like Tipler thinks. But what I think we will be able to do is to use a Tesla coil, which they're doing right now. That's that exploding picture in the laboratory 3 years ago in Japan, I'll talk about, to create massive fields of electromagnetic energy. Now, EMF, electromagnetic fields, are not gravitational fields, but they operate in a similar way. And again, I'm not a physicist, so those out there that know, I think we have an electrical engineer out there listening can explain. But my understanding is, and the research shows, is that these very high-powered electromagnetic fields are in fact bending space-time, the same way a gravitational field is bending space-time. So I don't know if they've been out there and they've actually measured it yet. I think it's research that needs to be done, but theoretically it's possible. What's going on in that picture, and there's a link now for those that are joining us to my outline, so you can take a look at it. But it says EMF creates same effect Japanese research. But basically what it is the Japanese have created a massive Tesla coil, the power, interestingly, of a Tesla coil or an electromagnetic field created by a coil is measured in terms of Teslas. And how befitting is that? When you get up to around 20 Teslas, to put it this way, if you get an MRI, that's about a 0.5 Tesla. Okay. When you get up to about 40 Teslas, it will destroy you. It's very, very dangerous. And actually, it destroys the very magnet that creates the Tesla coil. It explodes, and that's what you're seeing here. So you get above magnetism or electromagnetic fields of 50 Teslas, the entire laboratory explodes. And essentially, that's what's going on in that particular thing. So what they've done now, though, and this is a laboratory that's being done through the DARPA, which is done through the Department of Energy, DOE in the United States, Los Alamos Laboratories, which makes you nervous. I get it, and me too. But they're doing some amazing research that nobody can know about. But they're trying to create now the most powerful Tesla coils. Isn't that interesting? That were ever built with technology that Tesla was able to actually replicate, but probably not at this level. And what they're doing is they're actually using pulses of energy with a possibility of getting up to 100,000 Teslas. And they have no frigging idea what will happen. Talk about worrying about the end of the world potentially. What happens if you get to that degree of power? But that's what they're doing. And they last for such a short period of time, it doesn't actually destroy the technology. Okay, and I'm watching the clock. I don't want to go over, but I want to make sure I cover. We're getting through this thing. My brother and I, Todd, love time travel. And so we watched The Time Machine in 1960, which was an amazing picture. My little kid, Charlie, who's going to turn 5 next month, you know, loves that movie. I think it's a fantastic film. I didn't like the remake at all, but there's a picture of his time machine. And it very much resembles H.G. Wells' version of The Time Machine in his book, which is one of the most amazing science fiction books ever written. But you see that little thing that spins in the back, and that kind of reminds me a little bit of a Tesla coil. You know, it's spinning. I'm sure that's not at all what H.G. Wells was thinking, but think again, that's when Tesla was doing his research around 1899. That's when that book came out. It may have been 1892 or 1893, but everything was breaking during that particular period of time. So my thought is, and then we're gonna get right into Tesla's explanation of what's going on, is that imagine that any one of us now is sitting on that device. You're there. And, but you could push forward and you could push backward. If you push forward on that Victorian device, you go forward in time. If you push backward, you go backward in time. And I guess that big wheel, you know, it looks like a carnival piece, can spin in opposite directions. But think for a second now that wheel is actually a Tesla coil that generates an enormous electromagnetic field. A field large enough to create an envelope or net around the time traveler. Just large enough to just simply surround them. But anyway, sorry about the dog. The issue here is that we could create an electromagnetic field just around the time travel, such that there would be an enormous distortion of space-time or time-space. Very much the same effect that Einstein postulates would occur with, doesn't postulate, it's now fact, with time dilation, but essentially it would create time dilation. The time travel would disappear because the time travel would fall into the hole, essentially created in time-space, or space-time. And what would happen would be, if the time dilation were significant enough, if the electromagnetic field were strong enough, time within the time travel device, because you're inside the bubble, which is in fact a distortion of created by the electromagnetic field, his clock would move slow in comparison to everyone outside, just people sitting inside his studio watching him. That would be the exact same effect as the twin paradox. And so if he stayed in that machine for 5 days and came out, it could be 5 years or 10 years go by on Earth. So that's essentially how a device could work. I don't see anyone actually working in that area, and maybe I'm dead wrong. But again, I'm fascinated by the correlation between electromagnetic, not gravitational fields, because we're not going to get there anytime soon with our technology, which is primitive in terms of space travel technology, but definitely in terms of what the federal government, which is probably scary, in the United States is doing, and elsewhere. God knows what they're developing it for. I used to be an attorney years ago for the government. I represented DOD. I know a little bit about what government does, and it's quite scary. But those that are interested in time travel, this could be, I think, the new technology. In my in my e-magazine, which again, I urge people to, it's free, subscribe. It deals with very interesting issues. What is the world of 2050 going to be like? In all of the major areas, from medicine to immortality, to passing the Turing test, to EVP, to time travel, What are we seeing? And I believe that we will see a time travel device on or before 2050 that's based on time dilation. I'm sure of it. But I see very little bit about time dilation, electromagnetic fields, and I think that's where it's going to come out of. Okay, so let's talk about Tesla and what he did. The prevailing view, which may or may not be correct, is that you could travel endlessly into the future through time dilation. So if I create a very fierce electromagnetic force and I stay in it for 10 years, maybe I travel 1 million years into the future. That is proven by velocity. That is not disputed. That is scientific fact. So I can travel into the future now. If I could, travel at the speed of light, I see near it, I doubt it. That's why I'm into electromagnetic fields. But traveling into the future is a proven commodity, so it will happen. That's where the broadcasts are coming from Tesla and the North Station, and the constellation that he says he's at, etc. And Sonia wrote a book about it, the Milligan Experiment. And maybe you guys have intercepted communications. I haven't gotten anything from Tesla yet at all. But that's where they're coming from. It's coming from the future. But what about the past, which is very interesting? The prevailing view of physicists, including Ron Mallett, who made a mistake actually in his initial book because he wanted to get back and visit his father, who died of a heart attack, and he wanted to get back in time. He loved his father and tell him to stop smoking. And then he finally realized, well, you can't travel back in time before your time device is created. So he concluded that, well, he hasn't created one yet, and one doesn't exist, and consequently, ergo, he can't warn his father. Well, he's wrong, with all respect, and he sounds quite brilliant. He's wrong because there were time travel devices likely developed before his father was even born. And the person who created it was Nikola Tesla. He used his coil, his Tesla coil, to actually travel in time. He didn't do it deliberately. It near killed him. So there's, and I'll just talk about these briefly. There isn't a lot of information, but 1896, he was experimenting with one of his devices. He generated an enormous lightning bolt, and it actually pierced the top of his shoulder, went right through. And he fainted, and his assistant barely saved his life. And a journalist found him at a nearby bar, having a couple, and interviewed him. And this was during the heyday, and I mentioned this earlier, of these amazing magazines, and I read them actually. There was Collier's, there was a number of these magazines, Century Magazine around 1899, 1900, that came out every week with pictures and amazing stories, for highly literate populace, which no longer exists in most of the world. I don't know if they could read a lot of these articles the way they were written. They're just gorgeous. And because we didn't have all these other types of, nonsensical things coming out, in my view. But they did a story on him about that, and he talked about it. And what he said was that he was when he was hit by the lightning, he was sent out through a door in a place of displacement where he could see all time before him, past, future, and present. And he viewed it as a trip through time. Now, this is 1896, shortly after H.G. Wells's book came out. People didn't really think about time travel in any kind of way. There weren't books on time travel. No one really thought about it at all. But he grappled with it and actually thought that he went on a trip. That device, that Tesla coil, probably was a electromagnetic field that propelled him through. Again, this is sheer speculation. Time as early as 1896. So if Dr. Ron Mallett, who's trying to create a time travel device at the University of Connecticut, I think he's the only legitimate physicist in the United States trying to do that, and he's partially funded. I wish he would return one of my emails. I think the lawyer thing scares him. I don't know what it is, but the IP lawyer thing, I don't know what it is, but. If you can get back to 1896, he could certainly stick around to 1953 when his father died. Colorado Springs is amazing. It's an amazing place. And That's where Tesla built his amazing tower. And you can see a picture of it on my outline, which you can hit on the link. And Tesla didn't get electrocuted, fortunately, in 1899, but he did hear a message. And the coil was 49 feet wide. Again, I've held this thing up, you know, and this thing can kill you, believe it or not. I didn't know that. This little stupid little toy. Imagine what a 49-foot coil can do and what kind of electromagnetic field it can generate. Tesla got a message, which is called the 123 message. You could do a Google search on it, and he was receiving information. Now, Tesla thought he was receiving information from alien planets. Maybe he was, I don't know. My theory is that perhaps he was receiving information from himself, from the future. I've never seen that as anything that's ever been suggested, but the device in 1899 was a Tesla coil, likely able to generate a electromagnetic field, an EMF, powerful enough potentially to send voice transmissions, because they were using, of course, Tesla coils. Those were the predecessors of modern day radio. The Tesla coil was the patent for radio. And so it could easily generate a signal. And that may be what was going on in 1899. The next page is the 1943 Philadelphia experiment, which is the subject of some blockbuster movies. There's been a lot of people who've given a not very good reputation to science, by coming up with information. Some of it's accurate, some of it's not. I, for one, do believe that something happened. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but the idea was that 1943 was the year Tesla died, interestingly. He died at the New Yorker Hotel. And again, I have a play that I wrote on this 10 years ago for public radio. It's free, give it a listen. It's like 50 minutes long, and it deals with all of this stuff. A lot of factual information and legal stuff, too, which I think is interesting. But the theory was that Tesla got involved with the U.S. Navy, and the U.S. Eldridge was attempting to come up with a cloaking device to cloak the ship so it couldn't be seen by the German Navy and could literally disappear. And they were reportedly using the Tesla coil as a device for the cloaking. And then, according to one gentleman, and it's very speculative, so I don't know if I believe it, but if it does anything, quite frankly, it adds a lot of sci-fi craziness to what I think is a legitimate debate. All the other stuff that I've said thus far, I think, is dead center right. So I'm not sure about this, but it could possibly be true. They claim that one of the helmsmen on the USS Elkridge, by the name of Mallett, I think his name was, jumped off with his brother when essentially sparks started flying on the ship, and then he landed in 1984 in a place called Montauk, New York, at something called the Montauk Project, which was also a cloaking time travel facility set up by the federal government, and that's possible. But anyway, the issue here is that in 1943, it's possible that with some of the devices that Tesla created and invented, other work that was being done by inventors in the field, they may have experimented with a Tesla coil and something happened. Now we know that, if you go back a prior page, that in Tesla's early experiments in 1896 and 1899, something happened because he almost died. If you see lightning bolts outside your window that are generated by a tower that no one has ever seen before, that are 20 feet long, and you can see sparks underneath your shoes, and a light bulb you're holding in your hand half a mile away is lighting up, something's happening. So if you have an enormous Tesla coil on a ship that's generating an enormous electromagnetic field, there may have been some fatalities or they're saying that in fact the ship disappeared, turned green into a green mist, and then reappeared, and people were actually dematerialized and materialized inside the bulk of the ship. So their bodies were actually encapsulated by, it's a horror film is what they're saying, is what happened. But that's somewhat speculation. The last thing I was going to mention was Ron Mallett. And I talked a little bit about Ron. You can see a picture of him on the last page of my outline. He wrote an amazing book on it, and I highly recommend that you read it. If anything, it tells you how hard it is to be a physicist in the United States if you're African American. All the obstacles that you have to go through, which this guy did. to get to the level that he did. And then to get into something as speculative as this was something that was worrying him. But he's written on it extensively. He's gotten a lot of pushback in the industry. People think he's crazy, but he's still doing research. And he's using what are called spinning lasers to attempt to create what are called loops in space-time. Now, he's not doing what I am suggesting here. And again, I'm not elevating myself to anything like Mr. Mallett's level of sophistication in an area like physics. That's not what I do. But sometimes people like myself in the fringes, I'm not peer reviewed. I can think and write anything I want. So, that's what I enjoy doing. But what Ron Mallett is doing is he's operating within the realm of Kurt Gödel, who is a contemporary of Einstein, who also left right before the Holocaust, literally in Germany. Hitler would have joined everyone else in that horror. But what Gödel did was, he looked at it from the standpoint of gravitational fields, not electromagnetic fields. And he felt that if you can get a gravitational field powerful enough, you could actually create what are called time loops. You could connect essentially, since he thinks that space and time is a long, long fabric, you can actually bend it like a circle and join the present with the past and travel. And that's literally what Mallett is trying to do. He's still experimenting, trying to build a prototype. I don't know if he's visited with any IP lawyers or what he's up to. But he's still quite certain that he can't go back till the time travel device is developed. But I've read some recent material of his, and his current view is that, well, maybe there's some technology out there by aliens or something that another species where they've developed a time travel device that can actually go back, and he could utilize that. But I think what he's ignoring is Tesla, because Tesla did it. And so to close my remarks, Nikola Tesla was probably the most brilliant inventor who ever lived. He challenged and still challenges the existing paradigm. People know his name because people like Elon Musk, who I think is an amazing man, but he's all about money, and that's okay. Took his name and turned it into a brand. I don't think you ever hear Elon Musk ever talk about Nikola Tesla, but he's certainly happy to use it as his device to fund his company. Tesla was onto something, and he was onto a way of generating free energy that directly threatened the existing robber barons of the day, the rich people of the early 1900s, and the rich people of today. COVID has made people even richer. The continental divide between the poor and the rich is greater now than it was in 1901. There are more billionaires created in the last year than ever before, and it's thanks to COVID. Isn't that horrific? And people like Tesla, not Elon Musk, threaten the existing hierarchy. They don't want to give it away for free. And that's why you're seeing it. That's why you're seeing these issues, and that's why he was such a threat. That's why he was plagued and threatened. He had horrible OCD. I have it myself, horrible OCD. And Tesla had horrible OCD. He wouldn't entertain numbers of 3. He had to walk several times around the New Yorker hotel where he lived before he could even walk in the door. And at the very end, he was malnourished. If you see the picture, he's a very handsome man, very malnourished at the end, and died of starvation. And they found him almost like a mummy in the New Yorker hotel. It's in my play, and people know this, with papers all around him. His shop was raided by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the state of New York, which is currently investigating our former president of the United States, and in my view, rightly so. And the FBI grabbed all of his papers, and we still don't have those papers. So what was in those papers? I write about that in my play. What was Tesla onto, and was he connected to what was going on in 1943? So anyway, Tesla is an amazing man, and let's think about, final idea, how can the Tesla coil be utilized as a mechanism to create electromagnetic field and ergo time dilation? And then how can that principle be rolled out to create a workable time travel device? And can we do it? I believe we will do it by 2050, which again, I want to be redundant, is in my my newsletter, my magazine. It's www.future2050.net. Subscribe for free. We get nothing out of it at my law firm. I just want people to know about it and write for it, because I think it's interesting. What is the future going to look like? We could talk about it now. I'm writing a piece now on global warming, and I don't think the future is very good for the Earth. I don't think we'll fix global warming by 2050, and that's the current article. But the Tesla coil will be central. And so what's going on now is I believe that Tesla is communicating with Sonia through this North Station. He's using not electromagnetic fields, but he's using black holes to do it. And maybe he's wanting us to go, and I think one of the visitors right now who's listening to my webcast here said that he goes to Colorado Springs, if I heard correctly, and does taping. I think that would be a really good idea. Let's do some EVP at Colorado Springs and at what's left of Walden Cliff and see what we find. Because, and this is the last thought I want to leave you, I didn't put it in my materials, but I've postulated something that doesn't exist anywhere called time singularities. And it's something I made up. I haven't seen it anywhere. But we know that a singularity, Ray Kurzweil, who you may or may not know, brilliant man, came up with the concept of singularity, and so did Stephen Hawking, and that's a single point in time-space where everything converges, and that's how the Big Bang started, and to me, that's where we're going. But I think that if you create an EMF, electromagnetic field, that creates a time distortion, as I'm talking about here, time dilation and time travel, and you travel to the future. So let's say we build one tomorrow, and then all of us get inside a capsule. Also, the whole group, I don't know how many they made, hopefully I don't think there are that many of us here, but we all get in, and then we turn it on, and Todd can come in too, because I don't want him to get old, so we just find someone, a nice young person who's just born, maybe Charlie, who's 4, that would probably work, okay, and then, we travel 1,000, now, well, I guess we travel maybe, I guess we can't go too far, because let's put Charlie in it. And we travel 1,000 years into the future. My little Charlie's with us now. We're going 1,000 years into the future. And maybe we spend 5 years inside our capsule and we go back to Earth. 1,000 years has gone by. What's the Earth? We've traveled into the future. That's what Einstein predicts. And that's been proven through everything that I talked about this afternoon. We walk out. But what that means is we're in the future. And if we're in the future, that's where Tesla is. We then can travel back through time, through communication devices, through any kind of thing, back in time, because our time travel device will be 1,000 years in the past, went 1,000 years in the future. We now have a bridge to go back any point 1,000 years back in time, because we're there. Which means that, according to my theory, that there should be a massive proliferation of radio waves, communications, things happening, converging on the point of time when you first developed the time travel device. That's the singularity. That's the time singularity that reaches out. And if you're 1,000 years in the future, everyone is going to want to travel at all the points going back to the beginning, particularly the beginning. So you should see more and more evidence of it. And maybe that's what Sonia is saying. Hopefully that was helpful. Thank you.